And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, What's New with vSphere 7. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. He is a New Horizons instructor, Sean Boland. Sean, you now have the floor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mayanne, and thanks to all of you for attending. Good morning to those of you in the Midwest or out West. Good afternoon to those in the East or in Europe. Thank you for joining us. As Mayanne mentioned, my name is Sean Boland. I am with the New Horizons Center out of Omaha, Nebraska, smack dab in the middle of the country, bright, sunshiny Omaha, Nebraska. You do see my email address there on the slide. As Mayanne mentioned, we're going to try to carve out some time at the end for a little Q&A. So if you got some questions, you can put those in the questions window out there. You are also welcome to send me an email directly if you want to do that post-webinar this afternoon, tomorrow, next week, whatever. I am happy to respond to any additional questions via email. We also have the presentation slides available for you to download, and my email is in there. So if you want to take that away, that is absolutely awesome. A little bit about myself, as I always say at the beginning of my classes, it's the only time I can talk about myself and people pretend to care. I am with New Horizons out of Omaha, Nebraska. Been proudly a member of New Horizons now for a little over 13 years. Last month was my 13-year anniversary. I have been a technical trainer for a really long time. Basically since the late 90s is when I got into the technical training game. Kind of grew up as a systems administrator, Windows Server, Windows Client, got into virtualization really big time when VMware came around. And now I spend most of my time as one of the lead virtualization trainers for New Horizons, as well as doing a lot of work in the cloud computing space. Still do decent Microsoft classes from now and again, but virtualization and cloud, that's pretty much where I live. So what we're going to do today is try to give you a little taste of vSphere 7. You're all likely vSphere customers or going to become a vSphere customer. That's why you're here. And you all obviously have heard that very recently, VMware dropped the latest major rev, vSphere 7 on us. So what we're going to take a look at here, very briefly, going to give you a little bit of a history and context of where we're at, where we're going. And then what I've done is I've picked out what I think are some of the more significant features and changes out here. By no means is this everything that has changed. That would take us a week to talk about, not simply an hour. So I've picked out a few things that I think are significant. Going to talk about the changes, what's changed, why it's changed, how it may impact you. And then we'll finish up today by trying to give you some nice logical next steps. So, hey, if you want to continue your learning process, whether it's with New Horizons taking a class or some others, we'll give you a few resources. So there we go. All right, so let's learn something. I put together an abbreviated history of VMware and vSphere, and this is by no means a comprehensive history here. I've cherry-picked a few dates. The reason I did this was to put things into a little bit of context. Now, I'm one of the self-professed old guys in the industry. I remember most of these things happening. Keep in mind, we have a generation of system administrators working in our data centers today, and you may be one of them, that maybe weren't even born when some of this stuff happened. So it's a little bit of context here. My main point in kind of giving you this little abbreviated history of what VMware has done with virtualization and with vSphere is to kind of emphasize the point that where we sit today, looking at your data centers, looking at your infrastructure, for many companies, most companies maybe, we can say that VMware, and specifically their vSphere product family, that is your core infrastructure. It is what is running our physical servers, our virtual machines. Depending upon your buy-in to the VMware stack, maybe you're using things like NSX to manage your networking, and you're transitioning over your storage into things like vSAN, etc. This has become the core infrastructure for many companies. So when we come out with a brand new release of this core infrastructure, it's a big deal for companies. How excited are you for the upgrade? When are you going to upgrade? When you upgrade, what features are you going to take advantage of? Again, we're going to try to give you a little taste of some of that today. So we've come a long way since the late 90s when this started. As I like to say in many of my classes, had you described something to me like vMotion, which we all know is moving a running VM from one host to another. If you would have tried to describe vMotion to me in 1997, I would have looked at you like you were an alien. I'd have said, there's no way, that's not technically possible. You can't move a running VM off of its hardware, shoot it across the network and have it land on another piece of hardware. You can't do that. That's magic. Well, yeah, we do it all the time. A little bit of context for you there. Now, the chart that you see here is an interesting one, and this is one that VMware published not too long ago. They had a bunch of beta participants. Maybe you were one of these beta participants out there who was taking vSphere 7 for a test drive, kicking the tires, helping VMware refine the product, etc. And when they finished the beta period, VMware went to those beta participants and said, okay, thanks for helping us. We appreciate it. Based on what you saw and all of these cool new features here that are things that are available in vSphere 7, which of these features are you excited about? Which of these potential features do you think you're going to go out and start using? And this was that response, which again, I kind of found interesting. And I did use some of this in coming up with some of the topics I want to talk about. The two that are on the top actually kind of surprised me. Lifecycle Manager and Update Planner, which, by the way, we're going to talk about those two. That tells me, and it told VMware, that their customers, while the cool new features of the product, yeah, those are important, managing the infrastructure, managing the process of going from one release to another and a security patch and a feature update, et cetera, those are things that are absolutely fundamental to their day-to-day business. So it kind of surprised me when I saw that. I wouldn't have expected that. I honestly, if you had asked me to place a bet on which would have been the most anticipated feature, it would have been vSphere with Kubernetes, which we're going to talk about. But Lifecycle Manager and Update Planner beat it out. So again, this is not a fully comprehensive list. These are most of the major changes out there. But again, it's what you said. It's what the customer said. Now, I'm going to start with vCenter. vCenter, as we all know, if you're a vSphere customer, vCenter is your management server. It's what manages your physical hosts. It's what manages your VMs, et cetera. And a couple of key things have happened with vCenter in vSphere 7. First of all, the only way you can run vCenter now is with the vCenter appliance. That's it. Historically, as many or most of you probably know, we had the opportunity to run vCenter on a Windows operating system platform. It's kind of where it all started back in the day. In vSphere 5, VMware introduced this thing. Hey, here's this other way to run vCenter. It's called the appliance. It's basically a pre-built Linux VM out there. You can run vCenter on that. And we've kind of been in this parallel universe here for a couple of versions, v5, v6. And in the v6 era, VMware said, okay, that Windows vCenter option, okay, you can continue using that, but that's getting phased out. It's going to go away. And we've made it to that day. In vSphere 7, the only way you can run vCenter is on the Linux appliance. That's it. There is no other option. Windows vCenter server, gone. Goodbye. See you later. I think that's a good thing. It saves you money. You don't have to buy Windows licenses. The appliance is easier to deploy, in my opinion. Again, that's all good news. That's not bad news. But that has happened. That's a done deal now. By the way, as an instructor, what I'm looking at is, cool, that's one less thing I have to explain in the classes is how to run a Windows vCenter server, because we don't have to do it anymore. Now, the other major structural change to vCenter is with something called the Platform Services Controller, the PSC, for those of us who like to speak in acronym. Now, very briefly, your vCenter server is your management server. There's two great big giant internal components, the vCenter services and the Platform Services Controller services. Historically, in version 5 and version 6, there was an option to separate those two core components onto different VMs. To put the vCenter services on one VM and the Platform Services Controller on another. You could do that. There were some circumstances in version 5 where you had to do that or wanted to do that, et cetera. Honestly, that was a complicated scenario. It really made companies jump through some hoops, and it made high availability difficult and things like that. That option is gone. when you deploy the vCenter appliance in v7, there will be one and only one way that it's going to get deployed, and that is by putting the platform services, controller services, and the vCenter services on the same machine. That's it, no other option. It's embedded now. As an engineer and an instructor, I look at that and go, cool, it's more simple, less decisions to make. I like that. It makes it easier to deploy the server, high availability becomes easier, et cetera. It is less complicated, and I am all about being less complicated. Now, if you are a company that is still on the Windows vCenter server, or you are a company that has a separate platform services controller, you're one of those that separated that out, the good news is that when you go through either an upgrade process or a migration process from the Windows vCenter over to the Linux appliance, it'll converge it for you. That is built into the either direct upgrade process or the migration process, where if you have your PSC and your vCenter separated, that process will merge them together for you. And that's a really good thing. Honestly, one of the things that has held companies back from going to the vCenter appliance previously was maybe the migration tools weren't quite what you wanted. Well, they are now. It is a completely managed process to go from Windows to the appliance, or from a PSC and vCenter separated to an embedded. That is all handled during the upgrade or migration process, which is cool. Again, keep it simple. We like that. Now, with the idea of upgrade and migration, speaking specifically about vCenter, what version of vCenter do I have to be on in order to make the hop over to v7? And the answer is very simple. You got to be on 6.5 or later. So if your vCenter server is 6.5 or 6.7, any of the updates within that, you're good to hop over to 7. If you are on vCenter in an earlier state, the 6X's, the 5X's, et cetera, you got to get to 6.5 or 6.7 before you can do the direct upgrade or migration. Let's say you happen to be a customer who's stuck on 6.0 and you say, I really don't want to upgrade to 6.5 and then upgrade again to 7.0. Remember, you can choose to start over. You can just build a brand new fresh vCenter, detach your hosts, move them over. That's possible to do as well. But as far as the upgrade or migration process that will help you converge down those external PSEs, it is a 6.5 or 6.7 up to 7.0. So get to those levels first. If you're already there, you're good to go. And it's just for vCenter. Remember, vCenter is always the very first component that we start to upgrade. One other change with vCenter that I didn't include in my overall list of changes here, but I do want to mention the vSphere client, that new HTML5 client, which got introduced in v6. That is now the only client. The old vSphere web client, the one that was Flash-based, et cetera, that is now fully phased out. VMware said they were going to phase it out. That's not a surprise. Back in 6.5, they announced the web client was going away. It's gone. Okay, so forget you even knew about it. Goodbye, Flash. See you later. We're not going to miss you. So again, that's another change. Transitioning. When I had the feature list up earlier and what features were companies excited about and what features are they going to use, et cetera, the top two were the vCenter Update Planner and Lifecycle Manager. So let's talk about these. When it comes to managing the infrastructure and the upgrade, patching process, et cetera, these two may end up being the favorite features you've ever run into out there, because they take what is typically, not typically, but can be a complicated process of how do I upgrade, when can I upgrade, are things compatible, et cetera, and really gives you tools to help you truly manage the process. Now, what this slide is indicating to you is what kinds of things did you have to suffer through previously if you wanted to patch or update your vCenter server, your host, et cetera. And the reality of it was you had to try to gather information from lots of places. What patches are available? What changes are these patches making? What version of different components am I running out here? Is everything compatible? Does this version work with this version? Checking the interoperability matrix, etc. Reading the KB articles. I mean, there's a lot of work that you had to do to kind of do that. Well, the product or the component that we're going to call Update Planner basically does that for you. Now, the title of this slide, notice how I put vCenter Server Update Planner and I have vSphere in parentheses. This product, the Update Planner product, is specifically concerned with helping you plan the upgrade or the patching of your vCenter server. Now, I have the words vSphere in parentheses there only because I'm seeing online when this product is being talked about, sometimes it's being labeled as vCenter Server Update Planner, and sometimes vSphere Update Planner is being used there. The correct term for this is going to be the vCenter Server Update Planner. This is a product. It's part of vSphere 7. It's embedded in the appliance that is designed to help you go out and effectively automate all of that. All of that information you had to gather, what's compatible with what works with what, etc. This Update Planner is a product that is designed to help you do that work, and it's embedded right into the vSphere client. Notice up at the top of the screen there, I have it highlighted in a red box. It says new vCenter server updates are available, view now. So you're going to get that notification out there, and you're going to say, oh, cool. What's up with those? Let's take a look at those. And what the Update Planner, and again, focus on the word planner here. What the Update Planner is going to do is tell you, hey, here's your updates that are available. Okay, this is what we're looking at here. And then there are all kinds of reports that we can go out and start to take a look at and say, okay, well, when I look at my replication appliance, or if I'm using vRealize Orchestrator, or my ESXi hosts, or if I'm an NSX customer, or vRealize Automation, or an SRM customer, look at the right-hand side of the screen, okay? What this Update Planner is doing for you out there is saying, oh, where are you okay, green check mark, or what are you on now? What do you need to be aware of for this particular update, okay? What do you need to be aware of? And there's release notes, there's links, etc. out there. That's what Update Planner's doing for you. That's the heart and soul here. Again, the word planner is the key to understanding this. It's trying to help you do all of that hard work. Now, there are all kinds of reports that you can spin up off of this. When you actually want to deploy an update to your vCenter server, or you want to upgrade versions of your vCenter server. Now, not today, but let's say someday we go from 7.0 to 7.3, whatever. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I just made that up. How am I going to do that? Well, Update Planner is going to tell me, here's the updates are available. This is a patch, this is an upgrade, etc. Here's what you need to be aware of. Here's all your green check marks as your red exclamation points. Let's make sure everything's compatible. If it is a patch, a security fix, a hot fix, that kind of thing, you're going to be able to deploy that right through the VAMI, the Appliance Management Interface. We'll be able to go into the VAMI, click on Update, and we'll be able to drop the patch or the update on our vCenter appliance right through there. If it is a version upgrade, a 7.0 to 7.2 or 7.3, whatever comes out next, I don't know, you will use the vCenter installer process to do an upgrade, which is an in-place upgrade. Again, patch via the VAMI, upgrade versions via the installer. Same way you deployed the appliance originally. Now, there is one big giant caveat here. Update Planner is a part of vSphere 7. It's a part of vCenter 7. So you can't use Update Planner to help you get to 7. You got to get to 7 then you get Update Planner. So it's a chicken and the egg scenario. We got to get there first. So this is not a tool that can help you get from 6.7 to 7.0. But once you're on 7, now Update Planner becomes a part of your arsenal out here. Now, there is another component, and these are going to get confused until everybody gets used to the terminology here. Update Planner is part of a larger product called Lifecycle Manager, VLCM, because we all like to speak an acronym. It makes us sound smarter than the normal people. vSphere Lifecycle Manager. This is effectively going to become your replacement for Update Manager. This is actually going to be a patching product. Now, it is designed to take what vSphere Update Manager used to do and go beyond it. This is going to be a pretty big transition for a lot of companies. This is kind of going to change some of the fundamental things we do with patching, but it's going to be changes for the better. Sometimes we got to go through a little struggle to get to the end goal out here. Now, when we look at what Lifecycle Manager does, as opposed to, hey, I used to use Update Manager, I used to use VUM to patch my hosts. How is this different? What does this do? Well, VUM, vSphere Update Manager, has been around a long time. Many of us who've been doing this for a long time, I'm raising my hand now, I would say me, have thought that VUM kind of needed a facelift for a long time. It's like, it's okay, but man, there's so many more things we would love to see it do. And VMware's always kind of cagey about the stuff they're working on for the future. And every time I would talk to some of the engineers and things like that, I'd say, you know, Update Manager should be better. It should do all these different things. They kind of get this little wry smile on their face and kind of nod their head. And they were working on it. Well, what they were working on was Lifecycle Manager. So look at the side-by-side comparison. VUM allowed us to patch our hosts. If third-party vendors published updates through VUM, we could do third-party updates. We could manage virtual hardware upgrades. We could manage VMware tools and things like that. That's what VUM did. Been doing it for a long time. Notice Lifecycle Manager can do all those things. So we can patch our hosts as Lifecycle Manager, et cetera. However, when we start looking at some of the differences out here, the first difference, standardize the use of a single image across an entire cluster. So one of the things that Lifecycle Manager is going to do, and this is changing the game out here, is instead of thinking about keeping our hosts up to date by patching them, individual patches, what we can start to take a look at is, let's instead start thinking about getting an updated image out to all of the hosts in the cluster. Think of an image as a version of the ESXi operating system. Now, here's where that transition is going to happen for companies. This is going to be a big transition for you, but it will be better when you get there. The top of this screen up here where it says baseline, this is what VUM does right now. In VUM right now, you create baselines, which are just packages of updates, and you drop those on your hosts. You update host 1, then host 2, then host 3, then host 4. Cool. With Lifecycle Manager, when we decide to adopt Lifecycle Manager and use it to its full capabilities, instead of doing update, we're going to say, here's an updated version of the ESXi operating system. It's got all those updates in it, et cetera. It's a slipstreamed ISO if you want to look at it that way. Instead of thinking about dropping individual patches on each host, let's just drop a new version of ESXi on there that is already patched. And Lifecycle Manager can then start to approach managing your hosts from this idea of managing the image being delivered to the host. And instead of focusing on a host by host process, like what VUM did, Lifecycle Manager can say, let me just make sure that all of the hosts in the cluster are working off the same image. So we can start to broaden our scope of where am I focusing on for these updates at the cluster level than at the host level. Now, that's going to be a process change. It's a technology change. It's a way of thinking change, going from VUM today to Lifecycle Manager tomorrow. But again, in my opinion, when we invest the time to learn it, implement it, get it going, you will be in a much better management platform or profile when you get there. Now, I want to be very clear about something. You install V7 tomorrow. You can use Lifecycle Manager initially just like VUM and basically use it to drop individual patches and baselines out there. It will continue to function like that. When you transition over to using Lifecycle Manager fully, then we get away from the patch process to the image manage process. That's the transition. There is another component of this that is one that is going to be continually developed. It's the last 2 points down here. Install and manage third-party update and firmware and driver updates across the cluster. This will take hardware vendor buy-in and hardware vendor cooperation, but VMware's goal for this, and again, arguably it will not be here until all the hardware vendors get on board with this, is for Lifecycle Manager not just to be looking at the ESXi image idea, but, oh, your vendor's got firmware updates, things like, great, Lifecycle Manager can handle those too. Again, that will take buy-in from hardware vendors, but hopefully Lifecycle Manager becomes that single point. Now, distinguishing. Update Planner was that tool to help me with planning my vCenter patching and upgrading, what's compatible with what, etc. Lifecycle Manager is the eventual replacement for the VUM process. Again, I think people are going to get those two confused because they both have the words updated in them, but those are related products. And again, those are the two products that ended up on the top of the list from all the beta participants, which is interesting. All right, I want to hit a couple more features, and then we'll give you some time for some questions out here. So as a dyed-in-the-wool vSphere administrator, I had to put some stuff out here about vMotion. Okay, vMotion kind of made VMware famous and put them on the map with vSphere. Again, vMotion is the ability to take a running virtual machine, running VM from one host, move it over to the other, and not have to shut things down the whole time. Put a little historical view here. vMotion's been around a long time out there, and it's made VMware famous. vMotion, as you know it today, is going to continue to work the same in version 7. There have not been any major new feature changes. vMotion is vMotion. However, significant to those of you who run very large workloads, very large VMs. Think of your big giant database servers that, you know, have hundreds of gigs of RAM and dozens of vCPUs. When we talk about vMotion and those class or those types of workloads come into play, the customer says, yeah, vMotion's awesome, but you know, if I try to vMotion that giant VM, it's not quite as seamless as when I vMotion that little tiny file server around. That's cool, that's a magic, but these big VMs, it just doesn't quite work as slick. And the answer is, you're right, it doesn't quite work as slick. Here's the thing. vMotion behind the scenes is a race. You've got a running VM on one host. We want to take the state of that running VM, move it over to another host, and basically flip the VM over without ever turning it off. And what the race is to get all the memory and all the state of the machine copied over to the other host while the VM's still running and while those changes are still happening. If we can get all of that state and that memory synced up between the two hosts, flipping the VM from one host to another is no big deal. Like, look, it never turned off, it moved, it's magic. The large VMs that have hundreds of gigs of RAM and dozens of vCPUs, the rate of change on those VMs is so great that we basically can't get the two VMs in sync close enough to make that switchover process transparent like we can on a little VM. There's a stun time. Effectively, what can happen on those really large workloads is when the VM gets moved over, that VM gets disconnected for 1 or 2 seconds on those really large VMs. It does. Customers who are running really large VMs go, yeah, we knew that a long time ago. This is one of the big changes in vSphere 7 with regard to vMotion. Now, I put some really gory technical detail on the slide here for you, and I'm not going to go into the gory technical detail here. Some of you would like to geek out and talk about this, send me an email, I'll be happy to talk to you about it. But what VMware has changed behind the scenes is the way the CPUs are being used in transitioning from one host to another, and the way the memory changes are being tracked from one host to another. They've made those back-end processes radically more efficient. Now, what's going to change for you, the administrator? Nothing. You're going to right-click on the machine, you're going to select migrate, you're going to point to the other host, you're going to go through the wizard, and it's going to move, and oh wow, that was quick. Nothing changes in the front end for you as the administrator, but there's a lot of changes, as I'll call it, on the plumbing on the back end. You don't have to learn anything different. It's just working a lot better, which is cool. Now, VMware did a couple of tests with this. Oops, sorry about that. Make it the right slide up. Taking a giant virtual machine, 72 virtual CPUs, 512 gig of RAM, running a database that's just beating the heck out of the virtual machine. They did a vMotion with vSphere 6 and a vMotion with vSphere 7. And basically you have over on the left-hand side of the diagram, vMotion beginning, vMotion ending, and how long does that all take from a v6.7 over to v7.0. And effectively what you're seeing here is the vMotion finished significantly faster, over 20 seconds faster, which is a lot. And when you look at the performance hit that the VM took, because that was the other kind of hidden item with vMotion, is on those giant VMs, they actually took a pretty big performance hit to do the vMotion. You didn't notice it on a tiny VM because there wasn't that much going on. This is totally behind the scenes. Your process as an administrator doesn't change whatsoever. The end result is vMotion for large virtual machines is something that is absolutely on the table now. It is much less intrusive to the VMs, and it will be significantly faster. There you go. No process change, but behind the scenes. And again, I felt compelled to throw vMotion in there because it's one of the favorite technologies for all vSphere administrators. All right, let me hit one more technology, and then I'll do some wrap up, tell you about some classes and things like that. Without a doubt, the item that has gotten the most press since last August, when Pat Gelsinger, the CEO, started talking about this at VMworld, is Kubernetes. You literally cannot swing a stick in the IT world nowadays without whacking into Kubernetes. Kubernetes everywhere. The world is going Kubernetes crazy. Back at VMworld in San Francisco last August, Pat Gelsinger was up doing his keynote out there and made an announcement of something called Project Pacific. Project Pacific, in a nutshell, was basically VMware saying, yep, we see this Kubernetes thing. We understand that the world is transitioning from a machine-based world to a container-based world. We get it. We're on board with that. We're working with our cloud partners, et cetera. Project Pacific was specifically VMware saying, let's take Kubernetes functionality, which Kubernetes is basically an orchestration and a management service for containers. That's really what it is. If you go out to kubernetes.io, they'll give you that definition. And VMware said, well, we want to be a platform to run modern apps and to run containers and to be able to manage containers, and Kubernetes is what manages containers. Why don't we just embed Kubernetes functions into vCenter? Because vCenter is our management server. Every customer is running it. Why don't we just integrate that in? That's what it is. That's what vSphere with Kubernetes is. It's Kubernetes functionality, which is the ability to orchestrate, control, and manage containerized services, Docker containers, if you want to call it that, but to be able to do it natively from the management platform that you're already using, which is your vCenter server. Now, there's an awful lot going on underneath the covers here that I am intentionally glossing over. When we are talking about spinning up containers, managing containers, et cetera, those are workloads. They need access to storage. They need access to networking, et cetera. So in order to pull this off and not just say, vCenter runs Kubernetes now, it actually needs to be able to truly manage those workloads that are running on a vSphere platform. So the way that VMware has decided to pull this off and integrate it, vSphere with Kubernetes is available to you as a customer if you are running VMware Cloud Foundation. Let me state that a different way. In order to run vSphere with Kubernetes, you must be a VMware Cloud Foundation for customer. That is it. You got to go that route. Now, if Kubernetes services and containerized services in your vSphere environment is important to you, we're saying this is the path. This is how you get there. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the terminology, what is VMware Cloud Foundation? It is vSphere along with NSX services and probably vSAN services, although vSAN's technically not required for the Kubernetes cluster part. VMware Cloud Foundation is those three products bundled and implemented together. When you're a VMware Cloud Foundation customer, you're running vSphere plus NSX plus vSAN. And to be extremely clear, in order to run vSphere with Kubernetes, you need to be running Cloud Foundation. That's the way it runs. I have seen many questions to VMware online saying, someday is just a regular vSphere customer going to get this? Maybe someday. At this point in time, that is a complete unknown. VCF, VMware Cloud Foundation, is required. You want to run Kubernetes on vSphere? This is required. Now, the whole topic of Kubernetes and containers, et cetera, is a topic worthy of its own class. And by the way, there's a class for that. But effectively what we're doing here, or what you are giving yourself the ability to do, is to be able to host and run containerized services directly on top of the ESXi hypervisor, manage them with Kubernetes, which is what they are designed to be managed with, but that Kubernetes service is going to be from within the vCenter environment. You do not need to install a separate Kubernetes service. Kubernetes is embedded into vCenter. That's where it's coming from. That essentially turns vSphere, your ESXi host, into a native container platform. That's what it's giving us the ability to do. If you as a customer are going through that migration from a physical infrastructure world to a virtual machine world, now to a containerized world, sometimes we call that modern apps, sometimes you see the word DevOps getting thrown in there, okay, that transition and blending the infrastructure into the application, okay, if your company is going down that route, this is a big, big, big deal for you. Since you're already a VMware customer and VMware is your infrastructure, hey, let's merge these two together. Let's let them do both virtual machine management and containerized management. That is literally what vSphere with Kubernetes is. It's Kubernetes running natively within vCenter. Now, the thought process, the methodology of a company going from I run traditional VMs with my applications in them over to a containerized structure. Okay, that is a much larger discussion that a company is going to have. Where I think this has the most significant input. And as we were talking with Pat Gelsinger last year, they always have meetings with trainers the day before VMworld starts, and they kind of tell us all the secrets that they're going to put out there. When we were discussing this service with some of the management, et cetera, what really struck home with me was this gives a company a concrete answer to the how am I going to do it? If I'm a company that's running my application infrastructure on traditional VMs, and I'm starting to hear about this whole containerize things and run things in containers, and this is the way we're going to do this, and microservices, and all of those things that get lumped into this world called DevOps, and you're nodding your head, go, oh, that's cool. We want to go that direction. It makes sense to us. There's a fundamental question you have to answer. How? How are you actually going to do that and manage that? This is VMware's answer to this. And the answer is with the same exact infrastructure services that you have been building your networks on for the last 20 years. You have built your infrastructure on vSphere. Your infrastructure is changing now into a containerized world. No problem. vSphere is going to do that for you too. It answered the how. And that was one of the big gaps, in my opinion, in the industry, was how do I run those kinds of services on my own infrastructure? I can go to a cloud provider and run Kubernetes. I mean, Google invented Kubernetes. Okay, we can do that on the cloud, no problem. How do I do that on my own infrastructure? This is the how. And for me, this is the thing that's going to connect some of those gaps together and get those companies who are still not really buying into this modern app infrastructure to the, oh, we get it now. This is how we're going to do it. Again, big deal. Your company's going that direction. All right, so I'm giving you a taste, a tease, some key features that I think are cool. There's lots more there. So what's your next steps? How are you going to start to adopt and learn some of this? Of course, New Horizons is a training organization, and I'm a trainer. So how about you come take some classes? So VMware is being very aggressive in putting out a whole slate of classes. If you want to get up to speed on vSphere 7, here you go. This is how you do it. Now, if you are a very experienced vSphere administrator, you're on 6.5 or 6.7, you've been running it, you know your way around, and you just want to get up to speed on the new stuff as quickly as possible, the What's New class. It's a 3-day class. Basically, take that list of what's new, talk about it for 3 days. The Install, Configure, Manage class, which is like the core baseline class. The thing that's nice about the Install, Configure, Manage class is it quite literally is the how does it work, how do we build it? If you've never run vSphere before, or you haven't run vSphere a lot, and you're not confident with setting up virtual switches and storage and vCenter and clusters and HA and all of those core components, and you need to know that, the Install, Configure, Manage class is where you want to start. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, I'm teaching that class in a couple weeks. May 11th is my next time around that class. Please sign up for it. Come take it. You will have a blast. I guarantee it. We'll be all over that. The rest of the classes are more specialized, more advanced classes kind of going up the line. Down at the bottom of the slide, I have a link. You guys have access to the slides. That'll take you out to all of the course descriptions and outlines. If you're looking at training, here's what I encourage you to do. A, obviously reach out to your New Horizons sales execs. They are queued in to help you with this. But look at the outline. Look at the outline of the class. What modules does it have? What does it teach you? And then map that up with what you want to learn. If you've never run vSphere before, or you've never set up a virtual switch or storage or a cluster or HA, don't take the What's New class. Because the What's New class assumes, yeah, you know all of that's basic stuff. Let's focus on what's new. When you need to learn that core infrastructure, take Install, Configure, Manage. After you take Install, Configure, Manage, if you want to learn more about performance or more about troubleshooting, then you jump into the advanced classes. Now, one other class I want to talk about here that is special. You notice way down at the bottom, vSphere with Kubernetes. In the What's New class, there is one module about Kubernetes. One. It's a 3-day class. We cover everything that's new in the What's New class. It has one module about Kubernetes. That is not enough to become a Kubernetes on vSphere expert. It's not, but it's a short, quick, what's new class. If your company is going down this route to really run vSphere with Kubernetes, containerize your infrastructure, etc., and you're a VMware Cloud Foundation customer, etc., you need to take the vSphere with Kubernetes course. It is what is going to teach you all the things you need to know about Kubernetes. The What's New class is great, it's fantastic, but it's got one chapter on Kubernetes, not enough time to get into the guts. If you want the Kubernetes part, you need to take the Kubernetes class. You really do. You should have really good vSphere basic skills by that time, probably take an install, configure, manage, etc. Okay, but that is the class you want to look at. That class currently is scheduled to be released publicly and start to be deployed towards the end of May-ish, 1st of June. So I don't have an exact date, but that's the GA target for that. The What's New classes, the install, configure, manage classes, they're being scheduled now and taking registrations now. So just be aware of that. And again, take a look at the outlines, talk to your New Horizons account executives, send me an email, I'll talk to you about it. Absolutely, but there's a lot of opportunities here. One other item, then we'll take a couple questions if they're out there. And again, all of this is in the slides that you guys can download. There is a ton of information out there from VMware that is trying to help you get ready, educate you about vSphere 7, etc. Of course, we want you to come take our classes. They're awesome, they're amazing, they're hands-on, they're instructor-led, but there's a lot of information. I have included a couple of links out here, okay, to help you in that, either finding classes or that last link down there. There's a whole ton of content out of the vSphere blog about vSphere 7. Again, that's fantastic information. You come to class to spend some time with an instructor, get hands-on instruction, okay, etc. But there's a lot of information out there. Check out the vSphere blog, etc. Okay, I've talked a lot. Questions, comments?
Thank you so much, Sean. We do have a few questions that have come in. I'll give folks a minute or two just to type in any additional ones they have. Just to reiterate what you were saying, if you're interested in the material that was just presented by Sean on this webinar, or if you have any other questions, regarding what's available in terms of VMware and vSphere 7, please contact your local center to get more information. You can log on to newhorizons.com, do a quick zip code search for the center that's nearest you, and people can get you the information that you need. Also, the webinar schedule is up to date on our website at newhorizons.com as well. Just click on the webinars link just to view the full schedule and register for any upcoming sessions that we have. And another reminder that I'll be sending out an archive recording link to view today's webinar and for you to pass on to any colleagues that have missed the session. But diving deep into questions here, Sean, one of the first ones that came up was, is the new vSphere 7 license required? Or is new vSphere 7 license required?
Yes. It is an upgrade. You will go out and upgrade your license to vSphere 7. Yes.
And
for obviously for pricing on that, obviously contact your VMware reps, etc. for that process. But yes, it is a different license.
Perfect. Now, wasn't sure if you had gone over this during the presentation, but can vCenter 7 manage a 6th host?
Yes. So it is backwards compatible. So if you upgrade your vCenter server, which you always upgrade first, it then can go back and manage older hosts. I'll have to look up how far back it can go. 6.7, 6.5, absolutely. I do believe also it can manage 6.0 hosts. I'm giving you like a 99% confidence that that is correct, but yes, you can do that. So you can be in kind of that mixed mode, older host, newer vCenter process, no problem. That's pretty common that companies would do that.
Great. And this is more of a reiteration question here that's coming in. In VLM, when we talk about an image, is it about all packages that we use in VUM, but in one image, and it will be mounted and installed instead of a one-by-one approach? The person was asking if they understood that correctly or not.
That is correct. So when you go over to VLM and managing things using what we're going to call an image, it is like a new install of your ESXi host. It's going to be the ESXi host, all up to date on patches, etc. It's an ISO. So you're basically kind of using VLM to upgrade the host to that latest patch level. It is not doing patch by patch. It's doing a whole image. That's when we transition over to VLM. That's what VLM is going to do. We could use patch by patch initially, but when we transition over to VLM, that's when it's doing that at the image level.
Great. Another question is about the Flash client. It says, if the Flash client is gone in vSphere 7, then we lose the parallel remediation option when patching. How are we intended to patch large clusters before we are fully committed to the lifecycle manager?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Initially, when you first do your upgrade to vSphere 7, Lifecycle Manager initially is running in, and this is my term, this is not VMware's term, I'm going to call it VUM mode. So initially, you will patch exactly the same way you've patched using the VUM process. It does the same thing VUM was doing until such time that you're fully on 7. Then you can switch Lifecycle Manager over to starting to run at the image level. So, but until that point, it functions just like VUM had been functioning all along. So you can still patch your downstream servers and stuff like that in the traditional way, I guess is the best way to say it. And it's all done through the vSphere client.
Great. The next couple questions is in regards to the Kubernetes. The first question is, will Kubernetes and NSX need separate licenses?
So the way it's licensed in that respect is you are actually purchasing a license for VMware Cloud Foundation. VMware Cloud Foundation, there's several different editions of it. There's a standard and an advanced and an enterprise, and you can kind of pick which features you want. When you do that, you're getting the license for vSphere, you're getting the license for Kubernetes, you're getting the license for vSAN. If you choose that, it's all bundled into the VMware Cloud Foundation license. So you're not licensing them separately. Cloud Foundation is that kind of a package process for licensing those. And the Kubernetes function is just a part of that. When you're a Cloud Foundation for a customer, Kubernetes it's just there. Just use it at that point in time.
Great. And continuing that, the question is, the same vSphere host can run Kubernetes and VMs at the same time, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. And that's part of the beauty of it is the same host is running a traditional VM and the same host is running some containerized structure side by side. Same infrastructure, running two different things.
Great.
No problem.
And a question regarding the new planner and LCM. The VUM system had a means for a disconnected environment. Is there a way to replicate updates inside a secure enclave with a UMDS? Is this functionality still available in version 7?
Yes, same basic thing. The Lifecycle Manager works initially like VUM in that it wants to have an internet connection, either directly or through a proxy. That's the ideal scenario. But for those secure enclaves, disconnected environment, et cetera, there will be the manual download process that you're using today and import things into Lifecycle Manager, very similar to the way VUM worked in a disconnected environment as well. So same types of processes. You're still gonna have to do a little bit of manual work, but yes, it can function in that kind of a scenario.
All right. The next question is in regards to the Lifecycle Manager. Will STIG compliant ISOs be available?
They will still come through your DoD types of scenarios. They'll be giving you those ISOs out there, but Lifecycle Manager will be able to handle those STIG specific items out there. Yes, they will be available.
Great. And a couple more questions.
VMware's never going to not take care of their DoD customers. Is basically the short way to say that. They are very important. So.
Couple more questions here. I know we're heading to the top of the hour. When you're upgrading the Kubernetes, is that via the VLCM?
Yeah, so the Kubernetes components, I guess, is the best way to think about it. are embedded within effectively vCenter and then with the APIs down to the host. So as far as upgrading that will be a part of Lifecycle Manager when you're doing a vCenter upgrade or patch, or you're doing a host upgrade or patch. That would be updating or upgrading any of those Kubernetes components if they have any updates. It would be the same thing, because really the Kubernetes services become one and the same with the vCenter and the host there. Think of them just as additional services running there. So Lifecycle Manager will be handling that process as well, just like it does with vCenter and the hosts.
Great. And this is a question in terms of containers. It's very generic. It says, which container engine will be used?
I know initially the Docker container engines, as far as versions, I don't have the versions right in front of me, but the Docker container is what is being targeted initially. Not to get too deep in the woods, and if they want to send me a private email, we can talk about this. There's really two different iterations of the Kubernetes services. There's vSphere with Kubernetes, which is not a 100% Kubernetes compliant scenario. It's kind of VMware spin on that. There is something called vSphere with the Tanzu grid, which gives you the ability to run an absolutely 100% Kubernetes compliant scenario. So depending upon what the needs are, you could go with that Tanzu grid option, which is 100% Kubernetes compliant there. So.
Great. Thank you so much again. Those are all the questions we have today. A lot of good questions, Sean. Thank you again for presenting on behalf of New Horizons and sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you everyone for joining us and spending the hour just learning a bit more about vSphere 7. With that said, be on the lookout for the recording link. Everyone, you may now log off and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.